morning, everyone, and welcome to the virtual breakfast sessions. I'm Larry Sashin. Oh, today we have a fantastic panel to speak about where's the ROI. But before we do that, let us welcome our sponsor, ERA and Ed Flanagan. If you're interested in cash flow, EBITDA, and ROI, call Ed Flanagan at ERA, and he will find that extra cash for you. Okay, our panel, please let's introduce ourselves. Steve, why don't you start?
Hi, Larry. I'm Steve Zagor. I'm a consultant, former restaurant owner. Um, I was the dean of the non-cooking classes at the Institute of Culinary Education, and I was a practice leader for what's now PricewaterhouseCoopers in restaurant food consulting. And now I teach at Columbia Business School in NYU.
Okay, thank you. Paul.
I don't want to follow you, Steve. My name is Paul Torado. I'm a restaurant consultant, also a restaurant broker, former restaurant owner from the Boston area.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. And Richard.
I'm Richard Weil. I am in Denver, Colorado. I am a restaurant consultant. I own a company called National Restaurant Consultants, and we do startups as well as work with operations analysis. And I have enjoyed being in this industry for a long time, and also a former restaurant owner. And we had a chain of pizza restaurants, about 130 of them at one time, and been in the industry, as I said, a long time, and happy to join you, Larry, and appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Fred.
I'm Fred Clashman. I'm the editor and publisher of Total Food Service. Looking forward to a great session.
Okay. So thank you, panelists. Thank you, guests, for coming. And let's go back to the topic. Where's the ROI? I mean, we've been doing this. This is show number 67, and sometime in every single show, everything reverts back to higher prices, labor costs, labor problems, this, that, and it just seems that so many restaurateurs are working just to keep the doors open and getting a paycheck. It seems to be an industry-wide problem. Of course, there are a few that don't have that problem, but in general, there's a big problem with ROI. Richard, what are you seeing in this?
I think a lot of it is due to the old adage, butts in seats. I think we're seeing consumers either trading, like when we saw the Great Recession, 14, 15 years ago, people were trading down. Not necessarily they weren't going out, but this time we're seeing across the country people just not going out as much. I think they've gone from maybe where they're dining out 3 times a week, 4 times a week, that they're dining out maybe 2 times a week. So I think the biggest opportunity for the industry and seeing the declines is consumer confidence and the amount of visitations that they're having, particularly in the middle class, the upper middle class, where they see the shrink coming with their monthly bills. And now that we're heading back to school coming up here across the country, they're making decisions as to whether they're going to have school supplies, food on the table, or dining out options. So I think it's a consumer confidence situation. This is not a political comment at all. It's consumer confidence. We're not seeing them spending the money that they were spending even at the end of the fourth quarter of 23. I think it started to really creep into the second quarter of 24. So I think the ROI effect is butts in seats. It's not for every concept, not for every restaurant, but I think it's a vast overwhelming majority of restaurants are feeling that squeeze. And I think it's the consumer. You can do everything you can in terms of watching that labor number and battling that labor, the hours. You could be battling cost of goods, managing your portions, managing all the components that make COGS. But it really is a phenomenon, I think, associated with visitations, butts in seats is really what I think it's causing the biggest squeeze to keep these doors open of restaurateurs, and the restaurateurs are scared. And I think that's one of the other problems, not only consumer confidence, but when you derail the confidence of the operator, that makes it even scarier. And it's hard for operators to fake it, if you would, or even general managers to fake it in front of their staff. And so I think it is a bleeding effect, that we've just got to get that confidence back in the operation, confidence back with the consumer.
Thank you, Paul. Confidence in operators. What do you see going on with that?
Well, I think there's the haves and the have-nots. The people that are doing well, they're at the top of their game, happy. But the majority who aren't just live in a state of despair. And it is tough. I mean, I think I've hit on all sides of my own career. I jumped into deep water where I had to find a way to swim out of it. I climbed into deep holes, and I fortunately made it out, and the restaurant succeeded. But there's a lot that goes on, obviously, to running a restaurant, and there's a lot that goes on every single day, and it's a very unpredictable lifestyle. And if you're not making money, it's challenging. And I think what you mentioned before is that everyone gets in, they go 100 miles an hour and they don't look side to side, and you either become defensive.
Hi, Desiree. How are you?
I'm sorry.
Wasn't us.
Oh, see, I feel like, you live in a state of constant despair if you're not printing money. I mean, that's the reality. And when I talk to clients, they're depressed, they don't see a way out, and they don't know how to move one step forward because they become trapped. So it's hard to see a return when that's the way you're living.
Thank you. So in an educational vein, what do you see, Steve?
I just want to say, because both Paul and Richard were talking about two really important points. One was Richard was talking about consumer confidence and the current economic state, and Paul was talking about how restaurateurs are reacting to what the economic weather is. And it's interesting because I was talking to somebody about this the other day, actually a columnist. The economics of what are happening right now are actually starting to turn the corner as far as inflation goes. I mean, granted, we have a bad stock market bump here and there, but traditionally people react slower than the numbers relate. So there's usually a lag time of anywhere from 3 to 6 months or longer before people start to feel confident again and bring money back into the marketplace. Food is the most emotional purchase we make. And when emotions are being challenged in an economic challenge, it's the one thing that we're going to spend and conserve on the least. The other thing that's happening right now, which is unique, is it's an election year. And what we're hearing constantly from all of the parties and candidates is, you're doing bad, and so therefore we're going to make you better. And there's a constant drumbeat of people telling us how bad we are and how we're doing it. That adds to the pain, and that adds to the lack of consumer confidence, and that adds to the fear from operators. And most of this isn't going to be alleviated until probably the election is over. And I think, we're going through a downtime, and Paul is absolutely right. Most operators are in despair. I mean, I could go on and on. I just got a call from one the other day, and exactly what Paul was saying. He has no idea what he needs to do now. His sales have dropped 20%. He's a long-term successful restaurant in an opulent suburb. So both of these things, I think, are happening. It's the current trend of what's going on. And you're right, there are restaurants that are doing relatively well throughout this, but the marketplace is not asking for well right now. The marketplace is making us feel bad.
Okay, Peter Herrero, please unmute yourself. So you heard what we're talking about now. Let's talk about the actual person who's in the pits fighting this every day.
Good morning, everyone. Peter Herrero, New York Hospitality Group. I run a 90, for the last 38 years, I run a 90 2-year-old restaurant, a couple cafes, and a little catering on the side. I agree with the gentleman this morning. I will tell you, I've never run anybody else's race. I run my own race. So I'm paying the bills. I'm paying my staff. We're learning, we're growing. I don't need to be all things to all people. We've kept our prices pretty reasonable, but in our world, I guess we're lucky. We're not a specialty restaurant. We're a neighborhood bistro. So they're looking to come out and get value. It's not necessarily the steak. We used to have a prime rib dinner every Friday and Saturday night, and we did phenomenally well. But the food cost was insane. It wasn't mega. Our per person average is actually the same it was 7 years ago, but because we're serving less expensive, easier to produce food with a flair. So I agree with everybody, but I do think there's an opportunity out there for to-go food, an opportunity for happy hour. Happy hour is up. I've never seen happy hour the way it is. And yes, we have to cut some deals and with liquor companies we call them our bistro wines, good juice. I wouldn't drink the wine and it's not memorable, but it's good with a little food and cocktail. But I do agree with everybody. It is very challenging, but we have to run our own race, not anybody else's race, because the offices are not coming back.
Thank you. So we've drawn a picture of the problem. We heard a restaurateur who's said he's running his own race. How do we climb into your client's race? How do you help that person solve the problems we just spoke about? Rich?
So could you repeat that again, Larry? How do you solve the problems for the clients?
So you have a client. He's coming to you. You've seen a problem. How do you climb into this client's situation to help right the ship? What is the process? What do you do that this client can't do himself?
Well, mostly we're going to turn our ears open. We're going to listen. We're going to listen a lot. We're going to allow the individual to, if you would, bleed it out, get it out, and then we're going to really do the paralysis of analysis, if you would, and get underneath it and see what the heck they're talking about. I like what Peter said. You run your own race. Every restaurant, even if you're a small chain, large chain, it doesn't matter. Each location has its own race. You have your own market, your own clients. It's basically marketing 101, their needs, wants, and desires, and how you're going to fulfill them. And if you're listening to the client, to the operator, and then they're listening to their staff, because a lot of times right now we're finding the answers are with the staff. The staff, they understand what the client, the guests are looking for. Listen, and then get those eyes open. And I can't profess to say that I have the answers. I don't know what the other folks on this panel believe, but the answers are generally inside the restaurant. They're usually with the staff. They're usually with the customers. We'll go in and we'll even talk to customers, but talking to the operator, there was an old adage, and Charles will laugh when I say this, but the fish stinks from the head first. And truthfully, if the operator believes that they're going to be the Eeyore of Winnie the Pooh and it's woe is me, then until you undo that woe is me, you're not going to be able to fix it. So I think it starts with the head fish, and you work it all the way down into the staff, and you find out what the answers are, and you listen, and make decisions. Be nimble enough, and don't be so damn proud of what you've been doing for X amount of years. Listen and adjust to what makes good business sense.
Here, Paul.
So hold on. Does that mean that the problem is not what Steve said, that 20% less people are coming into that restaurant to begin with? Does that mean it's a problem internally, or does that mean as a group we're having a problem attracting diners and patrons?
Well, if you're asking me, I believe it's both. I think there are people want to dine out. I don't think people don't want to dine out. I think they do want to dine out. There's multiples and multiples of competitions. huge amounts of competitors. Everybody's fighting for a number out there. So I think you've got to just be doing the things as a leader, as an owner, to make the decisions that will affect your own race, if you would. What Peter said, I love that. You run your own race, and you've got to make the adjustments that you need to do to. Again, it comes back to what those customers and what the staff are telling you, because the answers generally are in the restaurant. Yeah, marketing or promotions, getting out in front, being smart, being wary of what people are looking at and wanting. I think Paul's probably gonna weigh in on this. I hope he is. He looks like he's ready.
Yeah,
But that's
very
my
well
thought.
said. Very
Um,
well said. I totally agree with everything you said. A lot of this is therapy, sadly. I think what we're doing. When I sit with people, when I had my own restaurants, I would constantly, I think that was my unique skill set, as I don't even know if you call it a skill set. I would listen. And I would have customers say, "You're the only. It's unbelievable. You listen to everything we tell you." Like, I'm like, I wanted the advice because I didn't want to be poor. I think that was really what it came down to. I wanted to improve my game. I didn't want to be poor. I was always leveraged, and I would listen. And then in anything that sounded like, "Hey, that's a great idea," I would give it a try. What I see now that I'm on the outside is so many people are so stubborn with their blinders on and their pride. You mentioned pride, that all you hear is the excuses. And then when you sit with the staff and the owners, what I find, which is kind of a surprise, because as an operator, it's always the challenge of the staff, the challenge of the staff, the staff, the staff, the staff. But I would persevere, but I would be frustrated by it. But now sitting with owners, I'm like, oh my, a lot of the times the owners are the problems. The owners are the problems, and they need an outside voice to tell them the truth.
That's
And
so true.
And it's just a matter of, what are they going to do with it? Are they going to take the advice? And that's usually where I find myself frustrated. I'm like, look, I can tell you the truth all day long, and you can feel good about it when I leave. But if you're not going to do anything, you're wasting your time and money. Like and if you do something, you will see results, and you'll keep your staff longer.
Well, isn't and this is for Bob, who's in our audience as much as anybody, isn't the nature of an entrepreneur all about their ego anyway? And part of an ego is being able to say, I'm wrong. I mean, isn't that a piece of what you talk about?
In this business, I think they struggle with that. A lot of owners struggle with it. It's like, this was my idea. I came up with it. Maybe it worked at one point, and now when it doesn't work, it's everybody else's fault.
Yes,
they also don't evolve, because
Yes,
it's it was the one trick pony. Like, this is what they know, and when it stops working, they don't evolve.
Yep. Bob, unmute. Bob, talk about a case study that you and I went to visit someone we know well, and
Oh my God.
what we went through that half day.
I can't reveal the name. It would
Yes.
persecute the innocent. Larry and I went in a vein of consulting and to help mostly with their sales staff and the whole operation. And in doing an analysis, we spent some time with the owner. And in about 5 minutes, the owner spent, it took about 15 minutes for him to tell us. But in about 5 minutes, we discovered that he was so thrilled with himself. Everybody else was wrong. There was, everybody had to be changed except him. And what we discovered in that 5 minutes was he was the problem. And it was egregious. It was terrible. And Larry, I don't even know if they're still in business.
Yes, they are. And the owner offered us a fairly sizable amount of money to retrain his staff. And Bob and I said, listen, to protect our reputation, we will turn down your offer, because what we will do in 6 weeks, you will undo in 3 days.
Yeah.
And so we walked away. And I think, you guys tell me, is this a common thing, Steve?
I was just totally agreeing with all of you were saying, especially what you and Paul just said. I mean, we can write prescriptions all day. We can listen to the symptoms of our patient and we can write prescriptions, but it's actually getting it done and making the changes, and whether or not people are capable of making the changes. And I'm always amazed when I would do consulting. People don't know what they don't know. And we are the vision of creating things that they don't know. And it's really hard for them to transition into something that, if you've been doing it one way for so many years, sort of successfully, how do you create a change that lasts? And a lot of restaurateurs don't want to make that. They say they do. They say, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And as you said, I think Paul or one of you guys said, I leave and I think, okay, they feel great about me. And then it collapses because they don't, and they can't. And that's the sad part.
You know, it's funny because I don't know if anybody remembers the episode of Seinfeld where Elaine buys a dress at Barney's, and it looks fantastic in the store. She comes back, it looks like a bag because Barney's had a skinny mirror, You guys have to be the real mirror who shows the ugliness. So how in a world of egos, and which seem to have turned everybody's fragile egos, how do you get that restaurant tour to realize that the warts on the nose are his? Paul?
I just tell them flat out. I just tell them flat out, and I talk about my own personal experiences just to try and share, and and not make people so confrontational and not make them feel bad, because I think I've worn all those same hats of frustrated. I know what I'm doing, but I was a little bit more humble than most of the people that I'm dealing with along the way, because of pure fear of, I was leveraged. I took on too much debt. So when I talk to other people, I can identify with almost everybody. But the difference that I try and show them is that if you don't move, you will fail. And then here's option 2, which is I can help you sell it. And this is what that looks like, and I try and talk sense into them. Like, if you're frustrated and you think it's the customers, like, well, this is what you're going to get when you try and get out, based on what you're doing today. So maybe you should take step 1, try and improve your game. And we try and pivot this. And maybe you have more than just like, you can do better than just skate by, or we try and sell it for you. I think that kind of brings people down a little bit. And then we talk the reality of what that number looks like, because there's usually a pie in the sky number in their minds that I bring down to reality of what it looks like. And I think I strip out some of that ego and,
So I have a question for Richard and Steve. Guys, it sounds like we're talking in a lot of cases here about independently operated restaurants. You guys also work in the publicly traded world as well. Steve, you've been quoted on things like the Red Lobster approach, et cetera. Are there other ways to look at this? And are there other approaches and strategies to try to fix this?
A lot of, it's a different world than the large public. And I think I was just quoted heavily in an article about McDonald's' lower earnings recently too. These are companies that essentially know how to make money. They know what they're doing, but they found themselves in situations which, far be it from me how you can have an all-you-can-eat shrimp special that goes crazy. I can't believe that was the only thing, and it probably wasn't. They got into some very expensive leases. They weren't managing the units on a managed basis and such. McDonald's, the problem with McDonald's is suffering from what I talked about earlier, a lack of public confidence and a lack of market share at the moment because people weren't buying cheap. So they had to get back with that $5 meal, and they have to get back with a lower price. So the bigger groups have sort of, they involve the same thing, but unlike an individual where, as we've been saying, they may not know how to do it and they may require us to have a mirror. The big guys know how to do it. And maybe they'll forget something, or maybe they're not good at managing. I was in a chain. I did some work years ago for Disney and Universal, and I would walk in the restaurants and they didn't even have a receiving scale. Like basic stuff. How do you know you're not getting shorted? Their recipes didn't include yield factors. I mean, it was just like basic stuff that major companies should know. So yeah, every once in a while they screw up, but the big guys have a different set of issues than the little guys, and they're harder to maneuver when you're a 90.
Is there anything we can learn from them? In other words, the ability to go to a distributor who's selling shrimp and get them to sell it below market to be able to do an all you can eat? I mean, are there things we can take from that?
Absolutely. In fact, I tell all of my students, I said, if you want to learn how the big guys do it, because they know how to make money. I mean, a company like Red Lobster or McDonald's or whoever, they can go back to their vendors and say, okay, now we are a lot of cloud. Now you got to do better for us. I mean, if it's Fred and Steve's Cafe and we go back to Baldor, they'll go, good luck.
Yeah.
You know? But
define, learn how the big guys do it. How does the
how
one
to
or two
control
store
recipes, how
operator
to control food cost, how to understand scheduling, how to use the latest technology, how to actually run the business to be successful and balance the success financially with the success spiritually and in the public eye. And I tell my students, the very first thing I tell every student and client, every food business is a manufacturing business. I don't care if it's per se, I don't care if it's McDonald's, it's a manufacturing business. And how do manufacturing businesses make money? Control costs, standardization, minimize customization, understand the market, understand how your distribution is, which either it's waiter, waitresses, counters, delivery, whatever it might be. And by the way, that's the other thing. You know, you said at the very beginning, how do we keep the doors open? Nowadays, it's how do you should never close the doors. Because today, the four walls is not something that's a boundary anymore. Everyone delivers. Everyone needs to have pickup. Everyone needs to do pop-up. Everyone needs the day of a single revenue stream gone. The public is too diverse. We're not downtown anymore. We're not in the suburbs anymore. We're all over. So we got to go out and get to the public. We can't just expect them all to come to us. So the door needs to stay open all the time and get rid of the door and say, okay, I'm coming to you. Great story. When I'm working on this client, we visited one of the top restaurants in New York, and the chef came out. Fine luxury restaurant, I won't use his name. And he said, I'll never deliver, is what he told us the story. He said, my food never holds up. Now he's doing $2,000 a day in delivery.
Yeah, it's interesting because when the pandemic first hit, the restaurants that were killing it were Chinese restaurants and pizza places because they delivered. So how, or, you know, we've got two different things going on coming out of that conversation. How do we change a business to delivery and the use, and Steve brought it in, Fred's favorite subject. How do we introduce technology into the mix in a restaurant where everything has been done by hand, everything has been passed by mouth?
I'm going to take a shot at a couple of these last few minutes. First and foremost, and I think Fred's going to love this comment, read at least 3 to 4 articles every day of the week, maybe 6 times or 5 days a week. The answers are out there in the trades. There's a lot of information out there as how the big guys do it and how even some independents have been successful. How you can learn by just reading. And I'm not suggesting that you have to go to every trade show, but trade shows are also going to help you because there's a lot of networking that can go on and can teach you how the big guys do it. I think Steve hit it. I'm not going to go into that again. I think he's absolutely right. It's blocking and tackling that the big guys do better than anybody because they know they've got the resources to be able to block and tackle. I think the other piece is that you start to think about the technology side of things. You can't get so tech that you start to wear your customer out either, or your staff. You've got to be smart with the balance. There's a good balance out there on tech. We're still in the people business. Customers still want to be served in full service restaurants. They want to be served politely, nicely, and efficiently. And so technology can help. Obviously, handhelds have assisted a lot of the servers in the ability to be able to be better at taking the orders or even getting the orders, if we would, fired off to the kitchen or to the bar. Those things are certainly very helpful. The kitchen display system, KDSs, are very helpful in terms of keeping things organized, but you can't get so tech savvy that you start to upset your customers either. McDonald's as such have, just like I was in the pizza business. I'll give you this example. We loved when the Big Four got on TV in the fall. We loved it because they taught the world how to eat pizza. We didn't need to teach people how to eat pizza. And the kiosk at the airlines have taught people how to use a kiosk. And now McDonald's, etc., have taught people how to order online. Now, we know that Chili's and the Brinker Group are coming back to more technology and an improved at the table being able to pay. So certain things at certain levels of dining will work for efficiency and technology, but I believe there's still the opportunity that customers want to be served. Customers want to take that breath away, that time to be served, and perhaps escape, if you would, for that 30 minutes, 45 minutes to an hour, and be able to enjoy a moment out and dine out. Even at a fast casual, I think there's those opportunities. Perhaps not as much in the fast food side, because that's certainly about meeting your needs as far as physiological, getting food, getting it done quickly, etc. But I still believe there's that opportunity using technology for that balance. I think you've got to be careful to make sure you're not getting so teched out there that you're overdoing it with your guests and that guest experience. Remember, we're still in the people service. Hospitality is still part of our industry. Hospitality. I still believe we're in the hospitality industry, and I think probably Peter would agree with that. I think that's one of the things. He probably feeds people food, but he feeds them hospitality.
Peter?
The big question, I just have to jump in here, is, and I've been asking this a lot, is what is hospitality? And is hospitality the same to a baby boomer as it is to a Gen Z or an X? And it's not. I've had this discussion with my son, who's like Mr. App, Mr. Tablet, and he looks at great hospitality as an incredibly great intuitive app that knows him, that knows his preferences, that basically is his friendly coach. Where, I'm a baby boomer like you guys, or some of you guys are. Maybe I'm older than anybody except maybe Larry. You and I are the same. Where I like to have a face and a smile and something. My son said, that's nice, but a well-designed app is also a great thing for hospitality. And you can tell by the companies that have great apps like Shake Shack and Taco Bell, Starbucks, their average check is much higher on the app than it is in person.
Okay, Peter.
I want to jump into this one thing.
Okay.
So within the last 2 weeks, this battle with McDonald's with this $5 value meal, that's become, the one thing, and I listened to the guy from Bloomberg the other day talk about it as well. The one thing that's missing is there's never any talk about the quality of the food. In other words, we talk about food production, we talk about hospitality. Somewhere we lost a great hamburger or something that, a terrific pizza. What happened?
People are not going to fast food. If you want a great fast food hamburger, you go to Shake Shack. You don't go to McDonald's. If you want a $5 meal, you go to McDonald's. It's know your audience.
No, but the point that I'm making, you sort of missed my point, which is instead of a race to the bottom with a $5 meal, why not go the other direction, which is to create a menu item of high quality and bring back somebody who may have used to have been a customer? Why is that wrong?
It's not, but maybe for McDonald's it is. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't. That's my somebody.
Paul, Richard, is there any value to quality food that tastes good? Have we lost that as part of the agenda?
I'm all about the quality food first. Quality food first. Yeah. 100% quality food first.
Yeah. I think, and the American, in a restaurant, people want, well, they go to the restaurant they think tastes good, but in a restaurant, you're looking for quality. Did you ever go to the store and buy an apple? They taste like cardboard. They taste like cardboard. And this is what people are getting used to dealing with. So how do we maintain the quality on this? How do we, or do we gear the quality of the restaurant to their expected patron?
Exactly. It's who every market perceives quality in a different way. If you go to Per Se and you spend $500, you're buying art. You go to McDonald's, the quality might be the chicken sandwich. And by the way, that I always found, you guys probably know this as well, over half of McDonald's sales now are chicken, which has always been a shock to me. You always think of McDonald's as a hamburger business, but you're right.
And is that driven by Chick-fil-A as a competitor, or is that driven by what's it driven by?
By the public. The public looks,
Yeah.
That's why you see they have like 20 different chicken sandwiches now
Yeah.
on their menu. Exactly right. And public perceives a little bit more quote unquote health, although McDonald's
Health,
is
yes.
getting rid of salads now.
Beef is taboo. Beef
Yeah.
is taboo. Chicken is wonderful. They forget about the fact that it's stuck in a fryer. It's done this. Everything is done to it. What's done to it, but it's a healthier form of killing yourself more slowly. That type of thing. So,
Can I say
Charles,
something?
Please,
Or-
Robert.
Is anybody on this call, or is anybody shocked, or does anybody labor under the belief that McDonald's mission is an altruistic one, to feed people good food, or are a lot of restaurants on some sort of mission to make everybody healthy? I actually believe that these fast food places, McDonald's with the $5 meal, and many restaurants with their menus and what they're doing, are only trying to turn dollars. They're just getting people in there. It doesn't almost matter what they're serving. So to answer your question, Fred, does the taste of food matter? Does the quality of food matter? As a civilian, I can tell you, yeah, sure, you make a decision on that. But from the restaurant's perspective, they're going to serve anything that gets people in there to turn dollars. I hate to be so cynical about it, but it's McDonald's in particular is that example. They're losing customers because people are going to Shake Shack, get a $5 value meal. People are demanding, are not coming because they don't perceive it as healthy enough. They're serving salads. They don't care that the people are getting sick from eating their meat all the time. They just want the dollars. So that's my cynical observation. I just wanted to.
it's not cynical. It's true.
Spot on.
Yeah, it's not cynical.
McDonald's is transactional, not transformational. It's the human gas station.
I'm sorry, Larry, isn't half of McDonald's profitability still real estate?
It is. Yes. Still the biggest real estate company in the country.
Yeah.
Not the biggest food company.
No. Leasing their
Yep.
properties to their users. That's right, Peter. Thank you. Charles, you're very, very quiet today. Why?
Well, actually, because it's a great panel, and to be totally frank, I mean, unfortunately, we're preaching to the choir here. There's a difference, and I think Steve just mentioned it a minute ago. And Peter mentioned it earlier, as did Richard. Everyone is doing their own thing for a logical reason. Every single thing everyone's talked about applies to my business in the club world. I can't compare any two clubs. One club that wants to serve really high-end food, does high-end dining. What is high-end dining? That subject came up. There are some of my clients that still have white tablecloth and still fill the room. There's others that couldn't put a tablecloth on a table if they tried, and yet have a higher average check than the one that does the white tablecloth dining. So that's number one. But Richard hit on a point that really resonated with me, which is when asked the question about what the problems are and how do you approach them. And I had to laugh when all the consultants were talking about it, because I've heard everything they all had to say. Same exact thing. At the end of the day, we all get paid to leave. And you're going to ignore us anyways. And you can call it altruistic, whatever. When you have a board of directors that thinks they know everything, they know nothing. But the reality is that the staff often knows half to 3/4 of the problems. And it is amazing to me how many decisions get made by the people at the top, regardless of what type of operation we're in, without talking to the staff. And that just resonated with me more than anything that was said this morning. I'm sitting here writing a report literally for a client where I asked the staff knew all the answers. And yet I got a chef that thinks he knows everything, and he clearly knows nothing. And what's recommendation number one? Fire the chef. Fire the chef, okay? Because this place is not going to come back to grow until the chef's gone. Staff knows it.
So how do we convince that board? Go ahead, Richard.
Well, you hire me, and I sit in front of the board and honestly say, you knew what the problem was, okay? And I'll say that in those words, okay? And the fact is, you have to fire the chef, and I'll sit there and I'll list half a dozen things that any of you would cringe. Whether it's, the chef that yells in the kitchen at the staff. Why is that acceptable? It wasn't acceptable 20 years ago, even though we allowed it, okay? It's not acceptable today in the world in which we live for 1,000 different reasons, okay? Why are you letting the chef do all this stuff? And then you look at me and say, I don't know where the problem is. You know exactly what the problem is. And I will literally at some point say, why am I here? Your general manager knew the answer. You ignored your general manager. I appreciate the business, but you got the answers in-house. But now you paid $25,000 to hear me and write a report. And you can do whatever you want with it, but you're not going to grow.
So it seems to all go back to listen instead of speak. And that is, listening. I'm guilty of it myself. Listening is the hardest thing to teach someone.
Steve also said it earlier too. And he used a very specific example that makes me laugh. I honestly can tell you that I probably do 3 or 4 of these kind of things a year. If I do 4 of them, 3 of them don't own a receiving scale. And it just blows my mind. Okay. Just absolutely blows my mind. Maybe it's because I'm a former Hilton corporate purchasing agent, but how do you have a food and beverage operation that you don't have a scale? I mean, I'm sorry, just like brick and mortar 101.
By the way, I worked with a client, and this is a great idea you guys could take from this. Before every front of the house member left every shift, they were required to put a comment card in a box of how we did every day, every shift.
Wow.
And
wow,
we learned that from Richard Melman. And it was the most fantastic thing. In the morning, I'd read those comment cards, and some of it was crap, but some of it was, a customer was complaining the soup was cold. And then I read another comment, the customer said the soup wasn't warm enough. So I went in the back, the soup warmer wasn't working. No one said anything. But that was a requirement, that little, I tell my students comment card, they go, what? So we could technologically make that happen, but it's an institutionalized, is what we were talking, it's an institutionalized element for a solution. And that helps.
Sometimes you get 99% right, and that one thing will kill the meal. And cold soup is one of them. That's it. So, guys, we've come to that time in the show where we're approaching an end. So listen, before we say our goodbyes to everyone, I want to go around the panel and give the people in the audience, because we are recording this, they will be listening to this for posterity, give them something to remember, some point that you want them to know. Richard, why don't you start?
Well, I think this has been a great session. I've enjoyed being a part of it. So thank you again for giving me that opportunity. I really think the takeaway here is listening. I think get your staff involved, turn the pyramid upside down. The customers at the top of the pyramid, and then your staff, and don't forget your vendors. I believe your vendors, we haven't talked about that today, but your vendors have a wealth of information for you. And I don't care if it's your produce vendor, your protein vendors, or your dry goods grocery, even your non-foods vendors. They have answers for you. They're networking, they're out there. So turn the pyramid upside down and make yourself last. Make yourself last. Don't be so darn proud of what you're doing. And unfortunately, forget about grandma's recipe that has 11 ingredients and you're only using 4 of those. You're using 4 of those for one item, and the product, the P mix that you're looking at says you're not selling any, you're not making any money. You can't be so proud that you can't make changes, but turn the pyramid upside down.
Thank you, Richard. Paul.
I want to just echo what you just said, Richard. Listen, pay attention. Yeah, it's all the same. I think it's all the same. That's really what I thank God I did. And that's what I pretty much just try and drill into people. Pay attention. Pay attention. Pay attention to every little thing. Every little thing in this industry does count, especially if you're a mom and pop.
Yes. Steve.
Yeah, I only end with a comment that you started off with, Larry, about return on investment. But I like to add another, and I know Ed loves the term return on investment. He probably stays awake at night thinking about it. But I also want to add the term return on aggravation. How much aggravation are you willing to put up with how little money, and how can you manage that aggravation to maximize your return?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
True. Fred.
Buy a scale, put a comment box in, and call Eddie. Those are my 3 comments.
Yeah, Eddie. Yeah. I just want to add my little 2 cents into it. Yeah, years ago when I was picking a URL for my website, I came upon this thing, and we haven't touched on any of this. Well, at least the last part. My URL is Plan, Act, Grow. We've told everybody to listen. We've told everybody to dive in, but we do nothing unless we get the people to act, to move on the change, to not be afraid of the change. The change is what is, we can do all the planning we want. We can give all the advice. If we can't get them to change, to act, nothing happens. No. So listen, it's a brave new world out there, and you gotta step off the cliff if you're going to make some changes, because truly the answer might be as plain as the nose on your face. So look in that mirror, call one of our friends over here. They will give you the great advice that you need, and by God, listen and act. Okay, we'll be back in 2 weeks, but we'll be back with our friend Ed Flanagan at ERA. Cash flow, EBITDA, ROI, they're more than just words. They are the lifeblood of your business. And if you are interested in increasing all of those, call Ed Flanagan at ERA. Ed just waved to the people, and he's there for you. Okay, folks, we'll be back in 2 weeks.
Thank you, guys.
We look to see you again. I appreciate everybody waking up and coming to us, especially Richard, who woke up extra early. And I just have 2 things left to say. Everybody, stay positive, test negative, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a good one.
Thank you.